Good morning and welcome. This is Brenda Meller. This is my LinkedIn Live interview series where I bring on inspiring people to inform and educate you. And I'm calling this series Enthusiastically Self-Employed because what we're doing is we're giving a great variety of tips for individuals who are coaches, consultants, speakers, and authors. And today I have on with me Dr. Summer Watson. Hey, Summer, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you. I'm happy to be here. I'm excited.
Well, I am super excited for you to be here too. And I'm really looking forward to the conversation. And you can see the topic above. We are going to be talking today about community building and creating safe spaces to grow relationships. Now, before we do that, I want to kind of do this is like the mic tap. Is this thing on? Is the live stream working? So, for those of you that are watching live, could you do me a favor? Could you please drop a quick comment below? You could say hello, good morning. You can tell us where you're watching from, even just a quick emoji. That lets us know that the live stream is picking up and that we are good to go. And I see one person, LinkedIn user, saying, "Good morning, ladies." So it looks like the live stream is going. As we're waiting for their introductions to come in, Summer, could you tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, who you help, and a little bit about your business as well?
Thanks for that question. So, my name is Dr. Summer Watson, and my story and who I am started a long time ago. But who I am really is I'm a doctor of psychology. I'm an author, a podcaster, a producer of events and documentary films, as well as a coach. So I've done things like advising, coaching, professional coaching. So that is me really wrapped up.
Awesome. Well, that's a pretty succinct description. I like it. Like, so sometimes people go a little long in the description, and short's okay too, because we're going to hear a lot from you today. And I see a bunch of people trying to get into the chat, which is awesome to see all of you live. And by the way, if you're watching this playback, still say hi later because we'll be watching your comments later on today. All right. So community building and creating safe spaces to grow relationships. So really want to jump into the topic here and hear your thoughts. So what do we need to know?
Well, good question. When I started out, it was a long time ago building communities. And I do believe it started out early because of just my ability to connect with folks, right? And so, and some of my experiences. And when I say I started early, it really started in college when I started building communities. And I was going to UC Berkeley and I was trying to find my way. I was really trying to find where I fit in and kind of what was I going to do? Like, what group was I going to connect with? And that was difficult for me because I always, from my background, I always seemed to not be invited to groups, or it was assumed I was part of, I was this or I was that. And so, or I wasn't enough of anything. So that got me really curious in college. It got me really curious about people, human behavior, group mentality. How did I fit in? Where did I fit in? And what did that mean? And so I really geared a lot of my interest towards culture and courses and learning and educating about community. And so when I got on that campus, I thought, where am I going to fit in? This campus is 30,000 people large, and the town that I come from is a small beach town of 25,000. So I thought, wow, how do I do this? And so I ended up joining a sorority. And from there, I ended up becoming sorority president. We ended up doing a lot of events. We ended up doing philanthropy and really building community around us. And I loved it. I mean, I absolutely loved it. And also working with my sorority as the president and having meetings, I needed to create safe spaces, which then led me into other areas of how to build community. And I ended up getting a master's degree in human services and community counseling. And so what that meant is I met with communities in neighborhoods, in schools, and brought community to the table. So when there was proposed changes, I knew there wasn't going to be much movement if I didn't invite community to the table. And what did that mean? What did that look like? How was I going to do that? And that was a learning curve. Let me tell you, I was young and I was like, ooh, how do I do this? Every community, from different schools to the community behind the center to like all the communities around us, they were all different. And I knew though that if I didn't involve them or invite them to the table, that not much change was going to happen at all.
Yeah.
So did that, developed in the nonprofit world, went into being on community-based boards such as the Marine Spouses Community Club, and sat on those boards. And that was when I was in Okinawa, Japan, and I was living there, and I was
Wow.
a
Hmm.
military spouse. And I thought, how am I, as an ambassador of the U.S., how am I going to contribute back into that community? And that was something that was really important to me, because we were in a different country.
Yeah.
I lived not on the base, but out in town, and I wanted to give back to the community. So what was a way that I could do that? And
Mhm.
that was of significance to me. And so as my story developed, I really, and worked in the human services field, worked in the field of psychology, got a doctorate in clinical psych, worked
Mhm.
with folks. I became a state mediator for the state of California. I
Wow.
also, yeah, I mean, I just did a lot. I started taking courses in crisis and communications. What did that look like to talk to somebody in crisis? And I worked for one of the largest locked facilities in the state of California, mental health locked facilities. And so people are always in crisis. So how was I
Mhm.
going to create a connection with these people who are in crisis?
Yeah.
And to me, that was really important. And there's a lot of tips that I could give, but that's kind of my story and where I began in starting to develop community connection and safe spaces.
And it's interesting as you're talking about this because nowadays I feel like, and I see a question coming in from Shauna
Mhm.
about building relationships online, and
Mhm.
your history is really building relationships IRL, right, in real life. And when
Oh,
you talk about community, you're talking about the community at large, not just online communities, but really people in your local communities or the organizations and locales and stuff that you support, right?
well, both actually,
Okay.
both because as I grew up, I also going to UC Berkeley and living just an hour and 15 minutes away from Silicon Valley, or
Mhm.
actually 45 minutes from Silicon Valley, we started getting really digital. And that started evolving. And a lot of
Mhm.
the people that were they were recruiting into Silicon Valley to develop these apps to develop, digital communication were from Berkeley. We had
Yeah.
CS majors. Some of those were my sorority sisters. So I was learning a lot about that. So yes, I do believe that there is true connection in real life, but I
Mhm.
also learned how to translate that digitally. And
Yeah.
so that's when I started building a podcast. I knew when I started building my business, I was like, you know what? I want to build a podcast. I've never done this, but
Mhm.
this is something I want to do to create community. So with my business called Core Women, it's an acronym. It starts with a
Mhm.
K. How we kinetically connect, how we organically learn from one another, how we reshape our lives through diverse interaction, and how we promote each other to create change. And
Yeah.
so that's exactly what building community and these safe spaces is all about, whether or not it is in real life or whether it's digitally. And one of the things I did about a week and a half ago was I produced a large conference in San Diego, again,
Oh,
bringing
great.
people together.
Mhm. That's awesome.
Mhm,
And, if you're just joining us, we're talking today about community building and creating safe spaces to grow relationships. So you've given us a little bit of the background about, your
mhm.
experience in community building. Now, tell me a little bit about, this concept of creating safe spaces to grow relationships, because I imagine you're talking a little bit about trust here, but, give us some more on that if you could.
Yeah, I can absolutely do that. So, again, I go back to this was a learning curve. It
Mhm.
wasn't easy. You were going into these really unique situations where you're working with these different school advisors, these community groups, and I'm like, how am I going
Mhm.
to do this? And working and starting a nonprofit, I was really getting my feet wet. They were just pushing me out there, and I'm like, how am I going to do this and create a
Yeah.
connection? And so, one of the things you just mentioned is building that trust. But
Mhm.
how do you build that trust? How do you go into a space and not say, "Hey, I'm here,"
Right.
like,
Trust me. I'm good, right?
I gotcha. No, but that's not how it works, right? So it's like, all right, the first thing you do to create trust is transparent. Why are you
Mhm.
there? Why are you there? What's your role? And how can you help them? So if there are changes being made in community, and being proposed, how are you going to build that trust? Well, you're going to invite community to the table. You're going to be transparent. You're going to establish trust by that transparency, asking how they would like to see the process in relation to the changes being made and
Hmm.
how they can be the change agents in this process. So it's not always about you, it's about kind of creating that space, but also maybe the parameters of like, okay, let's work. How do you want to create these parameters? Getting people involved, asking them how you can be of support, being aware. Here's another biggie, being
Yeah.
aware of and sensitive to diversity and cultural differences. And that's a
Mm-hmm.
huge thing. And that's something that actually I had to take courses on in, you know, getting my master's and getting my doctorate. Do I look people in the eye? Do I not? I
Yeah.
mean, I lived in Japan. Like, how was I going to communicate with these people verbally and non-verbally? What did that
Mhm.
look like? How did that differ from space to space?
And even within different cultures, sometimes making eye contact too long, can be a little bit ominous. Whereas if you don't do it enough, it's like you look shifty, right? So it's like understanding culturally and even on a personal level what people are comfortable with, right?
Right. Well, when I was living in Okinawa, you don't necessarily look people in the eye. That's not something that you do. And so yet here in the US, you do, right? So
Mm.
it was about, even when I moved there as a military spouse, I wanted to make sure that I was being culturally appropriate too. And so what were some of the
Mhm.
things that I did want to do and didn't want to do? And then I also followed their lead on certain things. And here's the other thing, I asked questions.
Yeah.
So if I were confused or found myself in a point of a state of confusion, I didn't assume. I wanted to make sure that I was asking questions, and that was really helpful because that gave
Mhm.
me some of the guidelines to follow. And the answer might have been different from person to person, but generally it was good overall guidance for me. So,
Yeah. And that seems like that is in this whole, scheme of like relationship building, building community and trust. It's not just what you're trying to get out of the new relationships, but it's also the mutual benefit. So I would think sometimes asking those questions helps to make it feel more collaborative. Would you agree?
oh, absolutely. So, asking those questions, asking clarifying question. Here's another tip: knowing what
Mhm.
it means to actively listen.
Mm.
What does that
Mhm.
mean? So, that means first being present and in the moment. So if you're coming to even a meeting, like a digital meeting, and you're like, "Da, da, da, da,
Right.
on the
On
phone,
your phone,
one
right?
day, mhm." That's not being present. That's being, you're not showing like, that you're present, that that person's important or that group is important.
Mhm.
So put the phone aside and be present where you're at, be in the
Mhm.
moment. And that is so important because you're showing people that they're also valued. Their time is valued, their energy is valued, you're being sensitive to that individual, to that group of people. So be
Mhm.
present and in the moment. So that's the first step of being a good active listener. And then paying attention to both the verbal and nonverbal verbal communication cues.
Mhm.
So what are they? Facial expressions, movements, people leaning in, people with crossed arms. There's a lot of different cues that are really important to pay attention to. So pay attention to those cues. The other thing is listen to understand. And I think a lot of us listen to respond,
Mhm.
but not to understand. And so when we listen to understand versus respond, then we're really just like
Right.
clearing that space. And that's also helping build that safe space, that trust, that community connection. So listening to understand and not to respond. Because our natural tendency, right, Brenda, is to go like, I'm thinking
Right.
about,
What am I gonna say? How am I gonna add to that? Or how am I gonna one up what she just said, right? S
yeah. And so a lot of times, and it's a skill, it really is, because I think it's a natural tendency for humans to like, how can I contribute to this conversation? I don't want to just act like I'm just sitting here. But if you're leaning in, you're paying attention, you're asking clarifying questions, you're paying attention to verbal and nonverbal cues, I think a lot of that adds to the trust and building those safe spaces.
Mhm.
And being aware again of some of the cultural distinctions. So I think that as it relates to communication, so what are those? Do you look somebody in the eye? Do you not look somebody in the eye? Do you
Mhm.
cross your arms while you're talking to them? Is it your stance or your posturing? So what is that? And that's something I really had to tune into working in behavioral health,
Yeah.
because I had to understand the verbal and nonverbal cues. Because when people are in a state of severe depression or psychosis, even, and let's say I had a doctor on the unit that was pregnant, there would be sometimes a lot of fixation by our patients. And if you didn't know those verbal and nonverbal cues, and you didn't see that kick coming,
Yeah.
that that doctor could have potentially got kicked in the stomach,
Wow.
so,
Yeah.
oh, yeah, or you could have got stabbed in the hand, or you could have, so it was, I mean, I've been in situations where I'm building community, but I'm in crisis situations.
Right, crisis, like, we gotta be, like, on guard a little bit, and it's interesting, as you were talking to, I mean, you talked in the beginning about building community relationships in person, in real life, in different
Yeah.
cultures and different communities. We've talked a little bit about building communities digitally, and then I was even thinking, like, even this interview that we're doing right now, and in the pre-show I talked about, there's, we're in StreamYard, and it's streaming live to LinkedIn. There's a little bit of a delay. So then there's this added layer of, when we think about the response of the audience, there's a 30 seconds. So we're talking about concepts, and then we're seeing things that are coming in. So it's almost like you have to kind of structure your communication style to your community based on multiple factors that could be changing and somewhat dynamic, right?
Absolutely. Yeah,
Mhm.
great, observation and suggestion and, statement, because you're absolutely right. And you need to be able to kind of read that room, read
Mhm.
the digital room, right? And sometimes that can be hard. That can be difficult, especially like say in StreamYard right now.
Yeah.
Are viewers there? Are they leaning in? Are they listening? Are they contributing? Are there comments out there? So you want to see those comments. You want to know what they want to hear. I
Mhm.
want to be able to support them as well in this learning process. So yeah, it's about reading what's going on digitally or in real life to gauge how you
Mhm.
can be of support and how you can build those relationships. And even still, there's certain nuances to digital communication, right? So we're
Mhm.
sending emojis. We're practically communicating in hieroglyphics when we're sending emojis,
Right, we are. Like, what the emoji means to me might mean a little something different. Even the letter K, like, when you wanna say "okay," if you say K, it could be seen as, like, passive aggressive versus brief or curt,
Yeah.
right?
And if you don't know those people that are on with you digitally,
Mhm.
what really makes an impact are those nonverbal cues.
Mhm.
So somebody's sitting there like, and they look bored, or
Yeah.
or they're leaning in, or they're like crossing their arms because you can see that, or they're like,
Right.
"Dum-da-dum-da-dum." Those are all cues, like maybe to re-engage them, maybe
Yeah.
to ask some questions, maybe, just to open up the conversation in a different way, or maybe guide it in a different way, or just ask more probing questions.
Mhm.
So anyway, yes, I think those nonverbal cues are so significant. But if you're confused too about those nonverbal cues, I would say ask questions,
Yeah.
ask the clarifying questions. And then
Mhm.
also, as I said, those clarifying questions and being authentic, being
Yeah.
yourself, because
Mhm.
people can smell it and see it from a mile away if you're not.
Yeah,
And I
they
don't care if it's in real life or digitally.
digitally, even, if there's a time delay, they can sense that. And it's interesting, I think about, you and I have both we both, mine right now is a LinkedIn Live. It'll eventually be a podcast. So I'll call myself a podcaster, even though it's not yet, but this will be eventually. And as a podcaster, when there's different ways to do podcasts and to share information. Some are solo conversations and some are interviewing. And I've noticed, and perhaps you could comment on this as well. When I'm interviewing a guest, and you talked about active listening earlier, and you talk about listening to understand, and also as the interviewer, I'm trying to guide the conversation, keep us on track. I'm kind of watching the timeline. I'm watching the comments that are coming in. And I'm also trying to pay attention to you. And there's so many things you're trying to do. Any advice for folks that are in that situation?
Well, I think again, if you go back to those tips and you go back to what feels right and so I will say, and I'm going to take a step back here. I have a podcast. So I have a structure there. I have an outline. So with every person that I get on with for my podcast, I do have an outline. And that's so important for me because for a lot of different reasons. It keeps the conversation on track. Sometimes I may get nervous. Sometimes, I maybe I'll lose track because I am nervous or whatever the case may be. So I love to have kind of an outline or a script. I think that's so important. And then also, practicing makes perfect. Like I had no idea how to do a podcast. All I knew is I needed to do one. Like it was so important because we are transitioning into this digital phase. And I'm thinking, especially during COVID, like, how do I connect with people? How do I connect with people around the globe?
Right.
What is that going to look like for me? And then how am I going to bring those people that I've connected with around the globe together in real life when the time comes again, right? And so that's when I started producing events, then the podcast. And I also have a live show on Instagram. So, and because people were asking, hey, Summer, you've got a podcast for women. So, how can men get involved with you? Because we really like some of the things that you're doing. So, I thought to myself, how can I do this and engage men as well? And I started thinking, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to create a live show on Instagram on my Life, Love, and Money show. And so with that show, though, I also brought in a partner because it changed the dynamics. And it was going to change the dynamics, but I liked the play between the two co-hosts and the guest. It made it a lot more fun. And then I knew it was going to contribute to the entertainment perspective of that live show. So there's a lot of different ways that you can engage with community, that you can ask clarifying questions, you can create safe spaces. I do have an acronym that I want to talk about too.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
So I created this acronym and it's called COOL. I was like, it's so cool. So
Is it COOL or what are we talking about
yeah,
here?
C.
Okay.
It's cool. So C is for connection. And this has to do with creating safe spaces and building community. So C is for connection. And so think about shared values when you're connecting. Think about your willingness to understand and support community. So connection, the C is cool. So the O is for opportunity. Opportunity. So think about the moment, the moment you are in with and trying to build relationships. Be in the moment. Think about what it means to be in the moment, the opportunity you have, and how you can approach and understand the person or the group that you're with. So, the opportunity. Think about your opportunity there. Then the next O is think about the ongoing development. This is something that is so important. How do I translate my podcast into real life? How do I bring these people from a digital space into conferences, into seminars? How do I create collaborations? How do I create with that O, those ongoing developments or ongoing relationships? So to me, that's so important because we're here for a reason. And that reason is one of those reasons is create community, bringing community into that space. The L, be ready to learn, listen, and lean in. So when you're thinking about building community and creating those safe spaces, think about just very simply, maybe the acronym COOL.
I like that. And I try to get them up on the screen as you're talking about. So I kept cool up there all the whole time. So this is all about community building, relationship building, creating safe spaces. So you talked about focusing on connections that you're making with people. The opportunity, can you refresh my memory there? Because I was trying to type and talk and I got the tickers a little bit wrong there. But is it about the opportunities you're creating for people?
Yeah, it's just your opportunity. It's your opportunity to be in the moment and your opportunity to build relationships, build authentic relationships.
Okay.
So,
Okay. I was trying to practice my active listening, and at the same time, my left brain had to do the technical. I was like, "Oops, it's not a ticker," and I'm like, "Well, I'll keep it up there." But sometimes it's helpful, and I'm being authentic. I don't
yeah,
make mistakes. I have learning experiences. I always tell people this, but I want to be authentic with. I don't want to like rehash something that you didn't really say. I'm gonna
yeah,
and
sure.
if I missed it, I'm gonna say, "Hey, I missed that," because somebody else may have missed that. I love the O for ongoing development. And I remember once upon earlier in my career, I worked for a call center in the marketing department. And they would always talk about on the call center, the employees that were answering the phones and the chats, they would always talk about the bridge for the future. So at the end of the call, you always give people like, if you have any additional questions, you can reach us Monday through Friday at this phone number or go to the web. Like you would always give them a place that they can go. And what I like when you're talking about community building is in having the ongoing development, like where can you go to learn more? Where can you go to develop some of those relationships or for additional training or education, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, is that a
Good.
question or is that?
No, that was I think I'm like, I think I got that. I was listening. I got my tickers in place then. And then I love the L, the learn, listen, lean in. You and I are very similar in our use of acronyms. And I think it helps people, doesn't it, in remembering some of those concepts?
Yes, it's so funny that you say that because during my conference it was on the 25th of February and it's called GritCon. And
Mhm.
I'll have to tell you why. So this isn't a pitch or anything. It's just, I have to tell you that acronyms are so important and that grit stood for growth, resiliency, intention, transformation, and connection. And so those were the things that the speakers talked about, that the panels talked about in relation to professional and personal development. And so when we were developing and I was co-producing that event, I was thinking, what are we going to call this? How can we integrate an acronym into this? And again, have a component of community building because that's exactly what is so important for me. And this is actually a subject I absolutely love. So
Yeah.
yeah, so acronyms are really important. And being a spouse of somebody who was in the Marine Corps for 21 years, and we
Mhm.
were together since 17 years old, before he ever got into the military. So when he went into the military, and I actually got a federal job, there was a list like this thick of acronyms.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. And I was like, how am I ever going to learn all these? But I did. And they were significant in every culture. So what I found is acronyms play a significant role. And that's why they're easier to remember, they're
Mhm.
easier to connect with. And so even during my event on the 25th, we had a speaker. I'm going to shout out Tammy. Her name's Tammy, and she's wonderful. She's a retired fighter pilot, and
Mm, okay.
she used the acronym PEZ, and so she brought it up a PEZ
A Pez
dispenser.
dispenser? How
Yes,
fun.
it was so much fun, and I was like, I love this. So I was like, do I get it? So she gave out a few too, so
Mhm.
to the audience, and I was like, okay, this is really great. This is a great prop. So acronyms, props are great for connecting with your community as well.
Yeah, I use pie a lot when I talk about LinkedIn, pie. I love pie. I like the baked good pie, but I
Yeah.
talk about like pie to help people remember how to grow and to get a bigger slice of the LinkedIn pie. Focusing on profile optimization is the P, invitation strategy is the I, and engagement is the E. And like similar to the person giving out a Pez dispenser, giving out a mini pie or a full pie or something. It just makes people smile. And sometimes people are like, oh my gosh, like they won the lottery. I won something. It's like, it's fun to go away with
Totally.
everything.
I
Yeah.
love that. And and maybe you can help me with this, or maybe folks out
Mhm.
there, you can help me with this. So I came up with this acronym cool just like a couple weeks ago. And I was like, you know what? I need to come up with an acronym. And I kind of like this. And I'm like, what am I gonna do? Take a big ice cube up on stage? Like, what am I gonna do to like show like this acronym and maybe
Cool.
have a
I
prop?
would say sunglasses with like COOL and then,
Oh, it's a good
like
one.
they do for the New Year's Eve, like
Yes.
2023 or something.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's something out there, but yeah.
That's a good one. And that's exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just throw it out to the community and say, hey, help me out here.
Yeah.
Here's what I'd like to go back to something you said too
Sure. Mhm.
about mistakes. We don't make mistakes. They're
Learning experiences, right?
learning experiences. And
Mhm.
I say wisdom. They're learned
Yeah.
wisdom. So, because all those, whatever, missteps, whatever you want to call them, right? They're wisdom. So people are
Mhm.
like, well, I mean, that was like, I did this. And I'm like, that's okay. That's totally okay. Because guess
Yeah.
what? You learn from that. All these great skills, how to overcome challenges, how to do this, and apply that to the next steps. So I love what you said. So I just had to go back to that.
Good,
So thank
good.
you.
I mean, this is part of like when we're doing these interviews, and I always tell my guests, I'm like, you're going to be talking more than me, but I feel like it is a little bit conversational. We're both getting to know each other, and I think we learn from each other going through
Yeah.
these conversations. I want to shift gears if we can, Summer, and I want to invite our audience if they have any comments or questions about this conversation. And today we're talking all about community building and creating safe spaces to grow relationships online. And as we're waiting to see if any other questions come in, I'm going to pull up. Shauna had a couple questions from earlier. And Shauna, thank you so much for watching. Shauna's asking you, Summer, what's the most important piece of advice you can give someone that wants to build meaningful relationships online? What do you think?
Well, again, being authentic,
Mhm.
really just letting, breaking down those walls, being authentic, leaning in and listening. I just think that's so important. And whether it's digital or in real life, actively listening goes a long way. And I provided tips earlier. So if you didn't hear those tips regarding active listening, please go back because there are stages to actively listening and what that means. So I think that's really important.
Mhm.
And you know, and be authentic because I don't care if it's digitally or in person, people can smell if you're not a mile away.
Absolutely. I mean, even like during this interview, they can tell if I wasn't listening to what you just said, especially if I'm asking the same question. So let's be authentic about that in terms of that approach. All right. Actually, I think Shauna had asked a similar question, but I'm going to move on next to Val. And Val, by the way, Val was the person I had put out an ask online. And this summer, I kind of said, who should I interview? I'm doing this series. At the time, I was calling it Enthusiastically Unemployable. Now I'm shifting and I'm calling it Enthusiastically Self-Employed. But I said I'm looking for people that can share knowledge and insights with coaches, consultants, speakers, and authors. Who do you know and who should I talk to? And Vale said Summer, and I said yes. So we reached out and we connected. So Vale, thank you so much for watching. She's asked, just kind of commenting, asking clarifying questions, and active listening are so important. Anything you want to kind of comment on or add on to that there?
Oh, well, those clarifying questions again. If you are
Mhm.
confused, it's okay. It's okay to be confused and, lean in, ask the questions, ask those clarifying questions like, am I getting this right? Or did I hear you right? Or this is what I heard. And, if that's not what I heard, or can you, restate what you said again? And that's okay. Let me give you an example.
Mhm.
When I was applying for college years ago, I remember waiting for, those acceptance letters. And I
Yeah.
thought to myself, oh my gosh. And I got an acceptance letter, but was from Berkeley. And it was contingent, like I got accepted to UC Santa Barbara, all these different universities. But the one that was really difficult to get into was UC Berkeley. And so one of the things that I had to do is I had to go in for an interview before I actually got my acceptance letter. So, and I tell you this because I had studied. I had done. My mom said, "Get your note cards out. Start studying. Start, understanding what you're going to ask or like how you're going to respond." And I asked when I went to the interview. I brought my stack of note cards, and
Did
I
you?
said,
Yeah.
I did." And I said, I asked a question. I said, do you mind if I use my note cards? I'm really nervous and
Aw.
I feel
Yeah.
like this will really help me. And I was there and I was authentic. I was nervous. It was the
Mhm.
first time I drove a long way by myself
Aw, yeah.
to get to this huge college campus. And she said, of course, of
Aw,
course.
they probably appreciate it. I mean, nervousness means that you generally respect the opportunity to be in front of that
Mhm.
person and to ask the questions. And I think sometimes if we don't say, if you wouldn't have said, "Hey, I'm a little nervous, I have no cards," they might have interpreted it as disinterest or lack of energy. And it really was like, "No, I'm just nervous."
I was
Right?
so nervous and I just wanted to do really well. And so
Yeah.
I said, may I, and I asked the question rather than
Mhm.
just sitting there nervous and like maybe not going to do well. I asked the question, can I use these? Is this okay?
Yeah.
And it really kind of lightened that atmosphere. And it
Mhm.
really showed that I was interested, that I really cared, that I was
Yeah,
leaning in, and that I wanted to do well. And so she was like, absolutely.
I love it. And I think sometimes it's like addressing what you feel like must be obvious, just to quickly address it, and then we can move on. Sometimes it happens when I'm in a live show and there's like a little hiccup with the technology or things are blurry, and I know it, in my audience probably, I'm like, I'm going to quickly say, hey, it looks like we're having some technical hiccups. I'm hoping it'll be smoothed out in the post production, so I'm just going to keep going as long
Yeah.
as everyone can hear us, and then people are like, yes, we can still, and like I just keep going, so you quickly address it and move on, right?
Absolutely. I think people are
Yeah.
even more forgiving
Hmm.
and are rooting for you when you can overcome those challenges, or really overcome the adversity that you're confronting in the moment. And
Yeah.
so I think that's really, really important to just be honest. I was talking to somebody, and I love that you asked this question or brought this up.
Hmm.
So they said, I was talking in front of a large audience, and she said, but I didn't feel comfortable like standing in front of a podium. And she said,
Mm.
so I went down, and she said, there are people who were on the stage, like Christina Amanpour. If you don't know who she is, like she's like,
Mhm.
you know, an anchor, like an amazing international anchor. So she said, and I thought, my gosh, I'm on the stage with this person and I'm nervous. And she said, I just told the audience I don't do well in front of a podium. I'm just going to come into the audience. And she started working her way into the audience, and she's just started asking these different questions, and she
Mhm.
started engaging the audience. And the audience, even when she stumbled, she said they were more forgiving because she already told them, she let
Yeah.
them know how she was feeling. And she said, and she got some of the highest reviews
See that?
at that
There you
event.
go.
And I was like, yeah,
Yeah.
that's the way to do it.
I mean, so many common themes of being authentic, and I we were talking briefly a little bit ago about technical issues and hiccups, and I want to point out one right now. Sajal, I'm not sure if you're aware of this or not. I went onto LinkedIn and I saw who it was. So it says LinkedIn user on my screen, and there's like a gray avatar. And there's two reasons that this happens. One is if the person hasn't enabled their third party settings. The other is if in their privacy they're not showing their profile photo publicly. So there's two reasons that that is happening. But I wanted to give her a shout out. She's coming up on my show in a few weeks. But it sounds like Sajal Thacker, I believe I'm pronouncing
They
that
don't
correctly. If
filter.
not, okay, thank you. It
Uh-huh.
sounds like maybe you know each other and you've seen each other in person. Is that right?
Oh my gosh, Sejal and I, let me give a shout out to Sejal.
Yeah.
First of all, thank you, Sejal, for being here. I absolutely adore her. She is a really good friend of mine. She was at my conference just on the 25th. We've met previous to that. So we actually spent time in New York City together, meeting a lot of people. And Sejal is an incredible community builder. And together, what we did in New York City was we brought community together, and actually had, when we were there having fun, we integrated that into 3 community sessions where we brought community together at different times. So yeah, we love building community and bringing people together. So hey, Sejal, thanks for
Yeah,
joining
that's
us.
awesome.
Yeah.
And what, there's another acronym, team, right? Together everyone achieves more. So when we collaborate and we work with each other, I mean, I find like I do sometimes do solo interviews, Summer, but I really enjoy doing interviews with someone like we're doing here, because I feel like we bounce ideas off of each other and we go back and forth. Speaking of ideas, you talked earlier about what can I do from stage with this word cool. And Regina is saying, how about mini handheld fans, like those little, that might be a kind of
Oh,
a
I
fun thing
love
too,
that. And then I could
right?
give those away, just like,
Yeah.
or maybe the sunglasses too. I love that. See, I'm learning and I'm gaining from the audience. Thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you.
All kinds of great ideas.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna, oops, we got one more question and then we're gonna probably start to wrap up in here. And this is a question from Vale. Vale's asking, do you think asking questions helps to be more authentic to the person you're talking to? What are your thoughts there?
I absolutely do. It
Mhm.
lends to authenticity. It lends to honesty. It lends to better understanding. It lends to curiosity and interest in that person. So, and what they have to say. So, absolutely. Thank you, Val, for that question, because it absolutely helps bring the community together. Just asking questions is so valuable. So,
Yeah.
yes.
That's awesome. Well, I'm going to start to wrap up our conversation here today. But before we do that, I want to just, I know that you mentioned a little bit earlier that you do coaching, but tell
Mhm.
us a little bit more about what you do. While you do that, I'm going to pull up your profile on screen in case people want to connect with you. So tell us a little bit about what are the programs and services and things that you offer, and just in case there might be somebody listening who wants to reach out and chat more with you about that.
Absolutely. So, some of the things that I really love to do that we're offering are seminars and conferences. So,
Mhm.
there's going to be more seminars coming up in person, and I really feel strongly that, there is a different vibe between doing things digitally and doing things in person, and the connection we can have as a community and what that looks like. And I got to experience that again on the 25th, which was so
Mhm.
wonderful. And the audience and the attendees got to experience and left saying, we want more. So I think, just those offerings of seminars. So stay tuned to um, my online accounts, the corewomen.com, or
Mhm.
my Instagram account at corewomen. But here's the other thing. I also do coaching, group coaching in relation to building communities, community relationships. If I've been asked to do many panels,
Mhm.
many different talks, all these different things. So that's those are some of the things that I do, as well as coaching and advisement and running different groups with professionals. So in maybe a C-suite, or,
Mhm.
with a company that just needs a bit more guidance in regards to laying the foundation for maybe their strategic ideas about business, or how they're going to strategize about their goals, about their values. And that's something that is really meaningful to me. I read a book about your core beliefs and values. And so that's something else I do and talk about, is how do you understand your core beliefs and values, and what's the strategy to doing that? So
Awesome. Well, lot of great information and resources and so many great insights here today, Summer. I want to thank you again for joining, and I'll give you the opportunity. Any final comments for individuals on this whole concept of community building and creating safe spaces to grow relationships? Any final comments on that?
is that for me or for
Yeah,
them?
I'm sorry. I realize I'm asking and I'm like, maybe it didn't sound like a question.
Well,
But do
I
you
didn't know there
have any
was.
final thoughts as we I like to think about it's almost like a bookend of a conversation. In the beginning, I said, let's kick it off and let's put the bookend at the other side of it as we close off the conversation. Any final comments you want to offer to
Yes.
folks right now?
Well, I would just say, lean in, listen, be authentic. Remember the acronym COOL. If you
Yeah.
missed that, please remember that. And just ask questions and be authentic and lean in. And I think those three things alone will
Yeah.
help build community and relationships and creating safe spaces. So, yes.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much, Summer. It's been a delight getting to know you through the conversation here today. And I know, in addition to the folks that are watching live, we're going to reach more and more people in the playback as well. And looking forward to continuing to collaborate with you and learn more about you and support you. I want to invite our audience. If you enjoyed the conversation, can you do us a favor? You'll see my comment up on screen right now. If you enjoyed this conversation, wherever you're watching this, wherever you're listening to this, please share this. Maybe share it with someone that you know, share it on social media. If you're on LinkedIn watching this, share it on LinkedIn post. It's a really great technique if you have not yet posted this week, this month, or this year, sharing it along. You never know who you're going to reach. You never know who the message is going to help. And maybe tell something that you learned. Like you can tell people, hey, watch this video to learn more about community building online and offline, etc. If you tag Summer and I in the post, we will comment back. Remember to use the @ sign when you tag in on that, if you could. And as we wrap up the conversation today, I just want to thank you for joining, Summer. It's been a delight chatting with you. Thank our audience for watching, and I look forward to seeing all of you on LinkedIn. Take care, stay healthy, and stay safe, and we'll see you online. Bye bye.